the jungle, and I don't know where to go. I tried to be humble, but it didn't get me too far.
Because they know we're going to kill each other anyway. They don't really even have to work. That's why they can sit at cafes all day. Because we are busy killing each other. We are busy not wanting to unite, not wanting to help each other, not wanting to care for each other. And for me, there's a synergy between these realities. So we can't just single out. Yes, what happens in South Africa is sometimes very extreme and maybe looks a little bit different than how it happens in other countries. But to me, it is part of the same design. It happens for a very similar reason. On the micro level, and this is where we work, we're not necessarily working on the macro level. So for us, it's to make sense of what we had talked about here and create a change process that affects and empowers community, family, and self. Now, the difference between the micro and the macro is that self, I can take a certain ownership of self. I can decide what kind of information I want to put into myself, what I want to learn, who I want to be mentored by. I might not always have the ability to choose what kind of job I want to do, because many of us have to go and negotiate to get jobs we don't even like, and often to empower other people. But outside of that, I often have quite a lot of power to decide what kind of person I'm going to be and how I'm going to see the world. That also means that I can influence a lot within the space of family. I can decide that instead of, so for instance, I come from a very broken and scattered family, but I've decided that the way that I define family has to be based on a closed, relational, warm engagement on a daily basis. And that's the family that I'm working within now, which is not always necessarily even biological family members, but it's a family that I see as important given the background I've spoken about as African people. I'm not going to open that up now, but during some of the other engagements we've done in Uganda, Mama leads a women's healing practice group, and we also have a men's group where we talk about the scars that we have that have been inflicted. And as men, we are not so used to talk about that. We talk about economy, we talk about the president, we talk about soccer, we talk about cars, but we don't necessarily talk about what has happened emotionally to us. And when we don't do that, we need to be drunk, we need to be depressed, because the mind needs to go somewhere. And when we don't give it an outlet, it takes its own course, which sometimes becomes dangerous. And that's the background to why some of us, as fathers, maybe even leave the responsibility we're supposed to take for the children we produce. The violence we sometimes meet out against sisters that we said we were there to protect and work with. And it creates all kinds of scenarios that we can actually start undoing if we start to understand the politics and the cultural necessity of family. Similar for community. Some of us can create communities of sameness, of relating, of building together. I'm trying to rush. I think, so remember I started this discussion with questioning what kind of power can we build. And I think there's three components that power should have. And remember, I'm now talking about practical Pan-Africanism. I want to talk about a Pan-Africanism that we all can practice. I don't know the income level in the room, I don't know what people do, so I want to position it at the lowest level, that nobody should be able to leave and say, oh, I wasn't included in that. I think it means that as people we need to look at our strategic power, which is our mind. The ability to think, the ability to dialogue, the ability to conceptualize and plan to build African power. Meetings like this are profound and important if we do that. But that also means that after the meeting, when the work actually starts, we need to be found doing exactly this. This is not the work. This is to be reminded that, oh, I'm not the only one who's crazy. Oh, there are other people who also think about these things. Oh, somebody's doing something related to what I'm interested in. I'm going to take your number. I'm going to come and see you tomorrow. But if it only happens in the conference hall, there's something very disconnected about how we relate to Pan-Africanism if we allow that. So strategic power, the mind. Spiritual power, which I exemplify by the heart. What we feel and what we relate to and what we allow to happen in that space. The ability to integrate metaphysical, meaning things beyond what we can see and touch and feel. Ancestral and ritual realities to build African power. Some of us are reluctant to do this. Some of us are scared of the spiritual space. We don't really want to go there. I just want to remind you that it's a place we used to govern. It's a place we used to be very comfortable, and we used to position incredible power as we had that knowledge and ability. And I position that a very strong aspect of our weakness is that we've listened to our colonizers and become scared of this power. Operational power, which I symbolize with the hand, the ability to position skills of organizing, institutionalizing, and implementing African power on the level that you have an interest to do this. I'm not going to dictate where this should be, but we can do things, whether that is to start a business, whether that is to start a family council for young couples, whether that is to start an African Saturday school because you are not happy with how the school system indoctrinates your child to think in a Western way. These are things that we actually can do, and we don't need a lot of money to start them. I understand, because the question probably is, yeah, but you can't just, so we're all going to start some small Saturday programs and counsel a few families. How is that going to change a whole continent with millions and millions and millions of people? I think underlying, and what I may not be saying here, is that I see the Pan-African solution process as a generational process. It's going to take time. We cannot expect this to be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but we need to be able to, and part of the vision that I have when I talk about this is building of pyramids in ancient Sudan and Kemet or Egypt, when thousands of people can be organized into building structures that they would not even see being complete in their own lifetime. And probably would have questioned, why are we building this big chamber for someone just because they are dying? I'm sure there's some people who wanted to leave. You know what, I'm done. I can't do this. This is just too much. The sun is too hot. But for some reason, people were motivated to stay on the job. And that teaches me that if we can motivate, especially our young people, to work on something that we will benefit from collectively, in time, these building blocks will become very important. So this is my parting shot. Obviously, our contemporary challenges has a lot to do with this. I've mentioned power already, so I don't want to repeat. But many of us are also concerned about unity. How do we unite? I think in every Pan-African discussion, it always comes up. We are not a united people. We fight each other. We're not standing together. How do we get that right? And I think maybe we need to look at these three in combination, because will is also a very important power concept. Not what do you want to do, what do you will to do? Meaning, what do you really set your mind to? Not because it's comfortable, not because you have the budget, not because everything is right in your life so that you can now devote yourself to it. But what do you want so badly that you're going to do it no matter what? If we can combine that with the ability to unify and the ability to build collective power, I think we are starting to weave back a very, very important power construct that the world around us, that obviously wants us to fail, cannot really, really, really continue to challenge us on. Why do we refuse to organize around race? Meaning that Pan-Africanism kind of gave us the illusion that, no, if we just pump ourselves with knowledge about Africa and we just look at our commonalities in terms of culture, we will be able to organize ourselves. But it hasn't necessarily worked. We haven't been able to organize that far. We have been able to do some things, but not as far as we said we wanted to go. Is that because there's something wrong with organizing around race? Is it too one-dimensional? Or is it because we are so infested with fears and doubts about our own rights and needs? These are my 4 suggestions to practical Pan-Africanism, and I might not be having the time to contextualize it deeply into many different examples. So I'd like for you to think, what do you do? Where's your place of operation? And what would these 4 points mean in that place for you? 1, radicalization. Self-determined political awakening process for fearless and determined action. We need to radicalize. The other day we had a conversation with students and we asked, why aren't Ugandans angry? And the point of the discussion was to say, we have a lot of things to be angry for as an African people. But what has happened to us for our anger to be subdued? Because some of us will confess to say that, and that's what happened in the meeting as well, saying that I understand, when I think about these things we talk about, I am kind of angry, but I think I've learned to live with my anger in a way that shouldn't bother anyone else, and shouldn't make me look like I'm being ridiculous or emotional or exaggerating. So maybe we have learned to behave a lot. Because with our history, it wouldn't even be strange if we carried a lot of hatred, especially towards Europeans. But those are the people we love the most. And it doesn't make sense. My point is not to say, yeah, we must all hate. If we can just hate, then everything is resolved. That's not my point. But it doesn't make sense from a psychological point of view, being at the position we are, that we don't even have hate. It doesn't make sense. So there's something that also has been done to us to learn that we should never be upset. We should never have anger towards people who have done devastating things to us. 2, cultural anchoring, meaning to relearn cultural knowledge and practices in order to fill voids of amnesia. Amnesia is a psychological term. It means that not only that you don't remember not having been to Gulu, but even when I show you a picture of you in Gulu town 5 years ago, you will deny it. You say that's Photoshop. There's no, I've never been. You cannot even vague, oh, maybe I was getting a lift or something. You can't, you will deny it. And that kind of speaks to how we relate to our history. A lot of us have suffered from amnesia because we cannot draw from the history. When the world looks at us and says, what are you doing, little African boy or girl? What do you do? What do you represent? This is our response. we don't know. There was that other thing we did. Oh, the pyramids. We built some pyramids. But do you really feel you own the history of pyramids? Can you break it down into details? What happened? How did it happen? Where did it come from? A lot of the pieces that makes up other people's strength and identity do not really belong in our narrative. So it's also about what we weave back and what we will to reclaim. 3, unrestricted innovation, meaning creativity and imagination as a priority. It should be obligatory to be creative within our learning places, within our families, within ourselves. We must be creative because we are creating something that we haven't seen for generations, a free continent. None of us in this room remember liberation. None of us. We all come from parents who were still not liberated. They all come from parents that were still not liberated. We haven't been liberated for generations, so we don't even know exactly what it looks like, what it feels like when we have achieved it. So we need to break it down, and this is where our artists, who we now seem to shun, who we now seem to be upset with, who we now say, but you are not even doing anything, you are just looking funny and creating pictures that don't make sense. Maybe artists are also having a different role. Maybe they're also trying to speak to us, trying to make us see things that we need to see differently than these corrupted minds that we often get from the colleges and the universities we are graduated from. To envision, plan, and create the world we want and need. See, we come back to world. Do we want to live like the way we are now? Are we okay with this? Because many of us seem to be okay. We may blog a little bit, we might tweet a little bit, we might write on Facebook, but we don't really seem to be fed up. What are you fed up with? The fourth one is humanization, and I need to give a little bit of context to this because we are a people that have been expected to be human in the face of any kind of treatment that we get. So maybe you also sometimes speak about the philosophy of Buntu in a place like this. And Ubuntu often is described as a philosophical response, that you always respond with kindness, that you always forgive, that you are always open, even when people are very harsh and brutal and militant towards you. I don't agree with that definition of Ubuntu. I think Ubuntu also has legal ramifications. So when you disrespect Ubuntu, you will have to be dealt with. And it's not a nice, cushioned, soft dealing with. Ubuntu is a system of justice. And when you provoke and disrespect justice, there will be a reaction to that. So Ubuntu also reacts. Ubuntu also sits you down and says you are wrong and deals with you and metes out a sentence for what that would mean. So when I say humanization, it means that we need to rescript the African being and our purpose and our orientation in the way we treat us, in the way we prioritize to work with other Africans before others, in that way that those of us who have a little bit more in our pockets decide, I'm going to invest this in some young people doing this because I care about my people. And I'm prioritizing us on top of other people. That's what is meant with the humanization. This, maybe in Uganda you also talk a lot about the fourth industrial revolution, and we should definitely have that conversation. But we also need to remember that it's a cultural revolution at the same time. It's not just technology. It's also based on a lot of individualism. It's also based on a lot of power constructs. It's also based on a notion that it's better to get machines to do things that actually that humans should do. So we mustn't just embrace something that we haven't even checked. Does this work for us? Is this something we really want? Do we understand what this will look like after embracing it 50 years later? We need to be able to look a bit into the future. So those were the four, just repeating them quickly: radicalization, cultural anchoring, unrestricted innovation, humanization. I claim all four can be done and practiced whatever entity you are shaping and building. That's my claim. You can disagree with me. So the question is, which learning context can we position as spaces of practice for that? Do you see yourself engaging in that? Do you think that's... Obviously, it's not presenting the whole solution. And I think I said something about that, the long generational process we need to engage in. Closing off with this, until the lions have their own historians, tales of hunting will always glorify the hunter. Meaning that if we represent lions, but we don't have our own historians, we don't know how to tell our story, the world will have to believe those who killed us, or those who attempted to kill us with their stories. So it's also a choice we make. There's an African-American scholar, John Henry Clark, who says that as much as we cannot take responsibility for the process of how Africa ended up the way it is now, we need to take some responsibility for us allowing it to continue. Which means that Europeans could not hold the stronghold they do on Africa right now if we collectively decided that that's not going to happen. So part of why they can, part of why Chinese can do what they're doing right now, is because we are not united, because we don't have a very strong will collectively to stand up for what we think is right, what we think is important, and the priorities that we want to choose. Sisters and brothers, those were my scattered notes that I wanted to share on this. I thank you for listening, and I hope we can take some time to discuss and share views and be practical. Thank you so much.
This world is a jungle, and I don't know where to go. I tried to be humble, but it didn't get me too far. Oh, walking this road alone. My feet have grown weary. Walking this broken road. Yeah, yeah. Oh, my oh, my oh, my oh. Acting crazy. I see them people, they might lose their minds. I see them people, they might acting crazy. I see them people, they might,
just sawa yo kujimukene sawa. Yes, sawa yo mfilika. Yes, sawa yo kujimukene sawa. Yes, sawa yo mfilika. Yes, sawa yo kujimukene sawa. Yes, sawa yo mfilika. Yes, sawa yo mfilika. Eh, mbuza twaza gwachi. Mbuza twaza gwachi fewa mfilika. Mbuza twaza gwachi. Eh, we, eno yesawa yo mufilika. Eno yesawa yo mufilika. Kuyimuka usituka bokwenyi milizanga. Mwecho chetuli, eyo chetusibuka, eyo chetuva. Ebyo buwanga byafe, eno yesawa.